Is the U.S. going to start supplying Ukraine with a weapon that can strike even further than the HIMARS? And is it going to be a game changer for the war? Guys, I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It is November 28th, 2022. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Okay, so first, actually, we'll do a quick check on the map. There actually hasn't been any changes to the front lines. We also, of course, see that Russian forces continue to push outside Donetsk city and next to Bakhmut, but they have not made any significant territorial gains. Still, the biggest news is definitely the announcement of potentially this 100-mile strike weapon that is being weighed for Ukraine. And for that, we're going to, of course, turn over to Ground News. Ground News has been a sponsor of this channel for months now, and they are honestly a great resource in this conflict. Ground News takes the stories from reported across 50,000 different news sources and aggregates them so that you can compare and contrast how the same story is being reported across the political spectrum. Their analysis lets us see how different news outlets along different political leanings cover the same story. It also lets us see the ownership of those outlets reporting the story, and it really lets us help see through the misinformation and disinformation in this conflict. Anyway, most importantly, right, we know that there's a lot of stories from both Russia and Ukraine of super weapons that are going to change the course of the war. But obviously, a lot of times those are overhyped or misinformation and disinformation. But when we look here, we can see first off that a lot of this reporting is being done by center outlets with a lot of credibility. Reuters, VOA, Radio Free Liberty, IB Times, Al Arabiya, and the Inquirer. These are all very, very legitimate news outlets, and it tells us the factuality, right? Some of them are considered mixed, but there are some high factuality sources here as well. When we look at ownership, you can see there's a good mix of ownership. Half are media conglomerates, which is about normal for U.S.-based stories. 20% owned by private equity, 10% are government, that's that VOA and Radio Liberty, and of course 20% wealthy private owners. So when we take a look at how the story is actually covered, you can see Al Arabiya, right? This focuses on the ground-launched 100-mile strike bomb. And when we look, we can see this is actually a proposal that Boeing has made in which they've said, hey, we can provide Ukraine cheap, small precision bombs that are fitted onto rockets already in the U.S. arsenal. This is going to attach basically the GBU-39 small diameter bomb onto an M26 rocket motor. This will give them a 100-mile range and allow them to be delivered to their target up to 100 miles away. And when we look at the map, we can see that 100 miles, right, comfortably would allow them to reach almost anywhere in the newly occupied areas of Ukraine. They still probably will not be able to reach into Crimea, but from Ukraine's current positions, but it would still basically eliminate almost all rear areas, safe rear areas for Russian forces. But we can see that the real appeal is that this is going to be able to, this is a cost-effective way to reach out and touch the enemy for Ukraine. And certainly U.S. inventories are rushing to get arms to Ukraine, but it's also diminishing the supply of Ukrainian, stores in U.S. hands. And the U.S. is always, of course, prepared for not just to fight the current war, but the next war. And they talk about the need to have a robust stockpile to deter Chinese aggression. And so this sort of ability to use munitions that are already in U.S. stores and that are already in production is potentially a big cost saver, which is definitely a concern for example, a lot of Republicans have said that, hey, in a time where a lot of Americans are struggling, it is very expensive to supply Ukraine with this level of munitions. Again, I maintain that being able to crush a regional rival's military while you don't have to put your own troops at risk is a great deal. But I don't sit in Congress. So Boeing, of course, the American industriousness, is trying to find a way to provide Ukraine these weapons on the cheap. When we look over at another source here, VOA, right, we can see that it's almost the exact same information as reported, which means that it's probably a very accurate story. It means it's very correctly reported, right? You can see they still talk about the different ranges. It talks about the M26 rocket motor. Here it provides actual cost. It says the M26 motor is abundant and the GBU-39 is only about $40,000 each. That's a steal in terms of guided rockets. And they may see them enter the battlefield by early 2023, at least at a small rate of production. It's GPS guided, can defeat some electronic jamming, works in all weather conditions, and can be used against armored vehicles. It has small folding wings that allow it to glide more than 100 kilometers if dropped from an aircraft, and hit targets as small as 3 feet in diameter. Of course, what's interesting as well is that not just these new weapons, but also things like the HIMARS being built by Lockheed Martin's missile unit. And Lockheed Martin has said that they actually aren't going to start seeing income coming from this weapons production effort until next year. And that's probably because the U.S. has been using its existing stores to supply Ukraine, right? So they haven't quite gone to Lockheed and said, they've probably gone to Lockheed and said, hey, prepare to start manufacturing in order to replenish our stores. But as they've said, they don't expect significant Ukraine-induced revenue until 2024 or beyond, which is an interesting expectation. But again, it doesn't mean necessarily that the war is going to go on that long. It simply means that by the time the Ukraine conflicts, by the lag between the HIMARS actually being used in Ukraine, by the time it sort of filters down the chain and ends up at a point where Lockheed Martin is actually getting paid for the HIMARS that it is built to replace those, 2024, which makes sense. The government is a strict contractor and it won't pay you for work you haven't done. So obviously Lockheed Martin needs to actually source and build these HIMARS, then deliver them. The government needs to verify that they are have met quality control standards, and only then will they get paid. So 2024 is actually exactly what I would expect for the time frame for payment from the government. Anyway, guys, that is all I had. Of course, remember to check Ground News. The link is in the description. You could try them out for free, and they really are a good service. I'm always amped to partner with them. They're an app and a website. But again, check them out for free. But you can also subscribe to get unlimited access and support these guys who are doing the good work of making sure the news is transparent and fighting mis and disinformation. Anyway, that's all I had. Thank you so much, and I'll see you all in the next one.